welcome back to the No Score Review Show, where we have in-depth critique and nuanced discussion of some of the latest movies, video games, and television. I am your host, Nick Green, and today is another episode of Franchise in Review, where we are going to be discussing the DCEU, or the DC Extended Universe, first started by Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, and we'll be wrapping up with James Wan's Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which is coming out very soon. And I guess actually a little asterisk, it is ending with that, but we will not be covering that in this franchise in review today. That will be getting its own review video once the film actually comes out. We're recording this in advance. We will be covering everything from Man of Steel to, I guess, what is it? The Flash. I have kind of decided that Blue Beetle is kind of in like cinematic universe purgatory, so we won't be covering him. It's like the lead has been like confirmed that he'll return for future Blue Beetle projects by James Gunn, but that film isn't like the start of the new DCU. So everything from Man of Steel to The Flash, and yeah, it will be a spoiler-free review. No, it won't be spoiler-free. Maybe we'll do a little bit of spoiler. Obviously, that will get like its own spoiler warning and everything once that happens, or maybe we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it, when we feel the need to discuss spoilers. Joining me for this franchise in review is Cole Parkinson. Welcome back, Cole.
Hello, thanks for having me back. I probably should have changed clothes and hat just to make it look like it's a different day,
No,
but
that's okay.
yeah.
I'm not doing that, so it's fine.
Yeah, fair enough. There we
go. You haven't seen all of the DCEU movies, but you are a DC fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to kind of go through memory lane and get your kind of thoughts looking back retroactively on some of the films you have seen, and just kind of your thoughts on the DCEU as a whole. Obviously,
Sure.
contextually, it's going to be very different now that we've got this upcoming new slate wipe of a new universe. But yeah, we will just kind of start with some general thoughts on the universe as a whole. Where do you kind of stand with it? Both kind of divorced from the fact that we are getting a reboot, and just kind of on like in relation to the fact that that is happening as well.
Yeah, I don't love it. Putting it lightly, I don't think there's a lot of
Yeah.
great movies. I think there's one great movie and then a couple pretty good movies, and then the rest is not great from what I've seen. And I think that's kind of why I quit watching. I mean, in combination with it being reset with James Gunn, once that was kind of announced, it was like, I'm definitely not watching any of the rest of the
Definitely
movies now. Like,
out.
why
Yeah.
waste 6 to 8 hours of my time watching these when it's probably not
Totally.
going to matter, and especially when
Yeah.
reviews weren't great to begin with anyway. So it's like, why would I do that? But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a clusterfuck if we're being honest. Not great. I mean,
Yeah.
whereas I know Marvel and DC constantly are compared against each other, but Marvel, you build from the ground up, whereas DCU was like, let's just build it like from the top down, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
They
mean,
were doing it for the sake of being different, I think, and they really shot
yeah,
themselves in the foot by doing that.
yeah, and it just ended up feeling really rushed. I mean, Man of Steel, I actually really like that movie. I think it's pretty good. Like, it's a little darker than I know what people would necessarily want with a Superman movie, but I love Henry Cavill. I think a lot of the story and plot points hit the mark for the most part. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember, walking out of the theater and being like, that's pretty good. Like, it'll be awesome to see where they go. And then Batman v Superman was bad. Like, that movie sucks. I've seen the original,
Right.
I've seen the director's cut. They both suck. There's some great
Yeah.
scenes with Batman. I love the fight scene with Batman in the warehouse, but like the rest, like the Martha stuff, and oh man, that movie stinks.
And then what other movies have you seen after the
Uh,
fact of those two?
Suicide Squad, the
We've
original,
got
that movie stinks. Oh my, I don't ever want to see that movie again.
talk
I know
about
David Ayer
clusterfuck.
has come out and said like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do a director's cut. It's like, sure, maybe
Yeah,
I'll watch
leave
it,
it let
and
yeah.
probably not. Wonder
No.
Woman, both Justice Leagues. Wonder Woman's good. I like that one a lot. Justice League original with Joss Whedon. No, that movie sucks too. Zack Snyder's Justice League is fine. It's 4 hours of my time that I'll probably never get back. But I also don't look back at it and be like, wow, that was a complete waste of my time, like, you know, Suicide Squad was. I've watched some of Aquaman, some of Shazam. Again, both of those movies were fine. I didn't love either of them. I didn't hate them either. And then what else? James Gunn's Suicide
Birds of
Squad, great,
Prey.
easily the best one.
Yeah.
Birds of Prey, I did not like either.
Okay.
Though, I mean, Margot Robbie.
1984? Wonder Woman?
No, I was gonna watch it, and then
Haven't
everybody
seen that
said it
one?
was
Okay.
no. Everybody said it was like kind of, you know, a waste of time and really bad. So I'm like, okay,
Then I won't watch it.
yeah, my time is precious. I don't necessarily need to watch
Yeah.
everything. So when I hear stuff is really bad, especially from you, whose opinion I trust, I'm like, why would I subject myself to that? So
Right.
yeah, I mean, Suicide
And
Squad,
then
James Gunn would be number one for me by quite a large
a big
margin.
margin. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess that's kind of a great point of saying, like, at least it's somebody I trust, somebody who's, you know, been doing this for a long time, who's taking over. He's got a lot of work to do, and it kind of starts with Superman, which it has to. Like, if you're gonna build the DCEU, like, Superman and Batman are obviously your kind of 1 and 2, but yeah, and then the rest, yeah, I haven't really dived into anything else. So it's been
the last year's Black Adam, and then nothing from this year would be the last like 4 films.
Yeah.
I
I watched
guess.
the post-credit scene for Black Adam because I'm like, oh, cool. Henry Cavill's back
Oh,
for 5 minutes, and then he was not back. So, again, it was like, I'm glad I didn't watch this movie. I watched the 30-second, you know, after credit scene, and
even that, you're
that's
like, okay, well, great. Now I don't have
I
a
was like,
minute of
cool,
my
he's
time
coming
back.
back. And then, yeah, 2 days later, it's like, no, he's not. So it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah. 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 This universe is so all over the place. We touched on it already with kind of like really wanting to play opposites against the MCU, of trying to start with Justice League and then work their way back, of establishing all of the members of this Justice League, which is like, that's a choice for sure.
Yeah.
Zack Snyder sort of being at the helm of it all was more of a divisive choice than anything. And then you threw in the whole like family tragedy and the production issues and everything surrounding that, and the studio interference of wanting to try and play catch up with the MCU.
Yeah.
And then kind of there was so many like DC creative heads being swapped around and like fired and rehired, and just so many like changes in the employment side of things behind the scenes that really probably disrupted a lot of any sort of plan they had going forward. I think for me, there was a good kind of streak where they started kind of saying like, okay, we're just going to do solo films. The solo films, like they might connect a little bit, but they are what they are. And they're just like, we're focusing on doing film by film, which I thought was a really like good idea, which is what they should have done from the get-go. And now actually having seen, because during this rewatch, I rewatched the entire DCEU, because I hadn't actually seen all of it, mostly for the reasons that you listed of just hearing bad things, and then B, just wanting to get a full context for it all when as we kind of wrap up this chapter of DC's history and cinematic history, because I hadn't seen heavy hitters like both Justice Leagues. I never saw Black Adam. I didn't see the Wonder Woman sequel. I think everything else I saw, but like there were a few things that I hadn't seen for a long time, like Batman v Superman. I only saw once. That was with you when we went and saw it in theaters. Yeah, like Birds of Prey, I only saw the one time, and that was like right before the pandemic happened, and just kind of a big brain fog went over me, so I didn't really remember much about that movie. So I thought a rewatch was in order to kind of gain a full context, watching everything in very close succession to one another. Just seeing how this universe has changed so much. But in the rewatch, I found that there is actually a pretty good streak, personally anyway. This is like, it's going to be divisive for everybody, film by film. But there was a pretty good streak, largely in that section where they were embracing these solo films and establishing these solo stories for their characters.
Yeah.
And then I ended up really liking Zack Snyder's Justice League. It is laughably comparably better than
Yeah.
the theatrical version. Like,
Yeah.
it's just they two completely separate ball games you're
Yeah.
playing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Not even
just like
close.
the theatrical version is just so cobbled together, and they're really
Yep.
trying to emulate the MCU humor and formula. Like, and I mean, having Joss Whedon at the helm, it feels like a straight up Avengers ripoff. So it's like,
Yeah.
but it just
So
doesn't
bad.
meld with the tone and the established like character beats that Snyder introduced and everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, that is a mess of a film.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is very fascinating to look back. I do think it's a very interesting case study to kind of go back, and I do have quite a few, like, in the grand scheme of things, of like DC films, and I mean, I'm more of a Batman film
Mhm.
fan in general anyway.
Who
But
isn't?
there are, yeah, exactly. Like the top three movies are films, like on my list anyway, are films that I think I would revisit and I'd want to like own on Blu-ray and have on my shelf and everything. Like you said, James Gunn's Suicide Squad is easily the best film of
Yep.
this whole thing. I still really like Shazam, really liked it on the rewatch. Birds of Prey is actually like my
Really?
third favorite. Yeah,
Wow.
surprisingly, I thought it was really good, and really tight. Margot Robbie is obviously like fantastic, and the action is amazing. I learned on the rewatch that it's the director of the John Wick movies that does all the stunts for that film.
Yep.
So I mean, they're gonna look great
Yeah.
regardless. So. Um, but yeah, this rewatch was very, very interesting. Um, and yeah, well, let's dive in a little bit deeper. Obviously, we'll probably do sort of the greatest hits, and obviously touch more on what you've seen as well, Cole.
Yep.
Can't imagine you're going to have much to say of movies you haven't seen.
No.
So we'll just do a quick kind of play-by-play going in order of release. Um, and we'll kind of start with Man of Steel. So, yeah, the rewatch again. It's that one's number 4 on my list for
Mhm.
me. It's
Fair enough.
still like top of the list for me. Henry Cavill is amazing. I think
Yep.
that the thing you touched on earlier of the darker tone, I think it also, I'm surprised that it was as like maybe divisive as when it came out, because it was coming off the coattails of the Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. So it was pretty
Exactly. Yeah.
tonally, and Nolan was a producer on the film
Yep. I
as
think
well.
he
So
did he
like,
do some writing or write the first draft or something? I
yeah, there
remember,
was
right?
he has a story by credit, I think, or
Yeah.
something. Um so it is surprising, and maybe even though that was to be expected, because I think all of that news did break like before the movie even came out. Um, that because I think there were rumors about like Man of Steel sharing the same universe as the Dark Knight and everything. Um,
Which would have been a
but I
terrible
guess
idea.
maybe,
Oh man.
oh, probably, yeah, yeah. Um, but I guess it is that surprise of just seeing such a character full of levity and like such an optimistic character as Superman be put through that lens.
Mhm.
But yeah, like looking back, I think it works pretty well. I do like the kind of deconstruction of what Snyder does with Superman and what it means to have heroes kind of in a more grounded, more
Yeah.
real world setting, and what the implications of that are. um, I think like the decimation of Metropolis really adds a weight to that. It does feel a little extreme at times, maybe,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
they
for
kind of
sure.
like retcon with like Justice League and saying like, oh, this place is abandoned. Oh, these people have gone home for work or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but I think largely it still works. What didn't work as much for me, and I think this kind of carries on to the Justice League as well, is um, Henry Cavill and Amy Adams. I don't think get enough time to fully bond as
Yeah.
much as they maybe should, especially with the amount of stakes that are introduced with their relationship and the implications of their relationship. Um, I would have liked to see more of that. The biggest offender for me is the weird, it has a very choppy nature. I think it's edited kind of weird. Like it's like flashback, present day, flashback,
Yeah.
present day. And it's kind of, there's
It's
like
all over the
maybe
place.
it's kind of all over the place. And there's like a very thinly veiled through line of like how certain flashbacks correlate to what's happening in the present day, but it's really not that often.
No.
So it just is a very odd editing choice for me. But like tonally amazing. Hans Zimmer's score is
Is
like,
great. Yeah.
I mean, Hans Zimmer, he speaks for himself. So,
Exactly.
uh, and yeah, I think it looks quite good. I really like the first like flight takeoff scene. That was really well done. Like
Yeah, there's a
Zack
lot of
Snyder
good things
has
in
a
this movie.
vision, and I think, yeah, his vision is commendable. I think that it kind of boils down to subjectivity by that point of like, if you like Snyder, then you're gonna find things to like about these films, and if you
Yeah.
don't like Snyder, then you're gonna hate these films. So,
And there's not a lot of people in the
um,
middle. It's kind of a love or hate. Like, there's not a
yeah,
lot of people in the middle as Zack Snyder. And I'm not a Zack
yeah,
Snyder hater by any means. Like, I think Watchmen is actually a really good movie with,
hmm
obviously the graphic novel is pretty hard to adapt, but I think he did a pretty good job. And, Superman at that point was coming off
hmm
Superman Returns, which wasn't greatly
right,
received. So, I mean,
yeah,
I think for the most part, he nailed it here. Maybe
yeah,
going with the grounded tone maybe didn't work, but I mean, coming off the Dark Knight trilogy, like DC was obviously going to follow with that after a huge success. I mean, does
exactly,
it make sense in a Superman
yeah,
world? Maybe not as much as Batman, obviously, but I mean,
hmm
yeah, they were kind of had their hands tied there because people were used to this gritty take on DC characters, and
yeah.
obviously
Well, even
Batman
like
might
with
be
Iron Man too, and Marvel
exactly.
characters, right? Like
Yep.
Phase One feels pretty grounded a lot of the time as well. It's more the
Yep.
back half of Phase One that gets a little more fantastical, but
Yep.
yeah, there was a lot of influence surrounding that era, so it makes sense.
Yep.
Um, Batman v Superman. So the rewatch again. So now I have also seen theatrical and what is it like Ultimate Edition or whatever.
Yeah, I can't remember. I got it on my
It's
shelf. Let's see
it's
if I can.
it it's the
Yeah, I
basically
can't
the
see it.
same, but it's longer. I
Yeah,
found
pretty much.
it's like same problems, but it's longer.
Yeah, I
Um,
when it first came out, I watched it again, and I'm like, cool. I'll probably never watch this again. It's like,
yeah,
I think there's some good stuff, but the negatives outweigh the positives in this movie a lot. I actually really like Ben Affleck as Batman and Bruce
yeah.
Wayne for the most part. Like,
hmm
is he my Batman that I'm gonna remember? No, but I don't think he's the worst either. Like, I think he did a pretty good job with the
hmm
material he had.
Yeah, yeah. I think this it feels, and I guess we'll probably get into it more once we cover like Snyder Cut and everything. But it, I think it works better as a almost prologue to the Snyder Cut
Yeah,
than it does as a solo film and a Batman v Superman film. Like there is so much in this movie that Snyder tries to cover, and
yeah,
it rarely pays off well. Like I really do like because he leans even harder into the themes he brought up in Man of Steel, because especially because it happens so like canonically it happens so close after the events as well, maybe like
yeah,
a couple of years or something. Um, and I really like the implications of that and how Batman kind of plays into it as well, of like um, what it means to have a godlike figure in our world, and like what is his place in society, whose rules is he playing by,
yeah,
and how does he fit into this whole thing. It's really interesting, but I don't think he like sticks the landing on what he's trying to say with those themes and those topics, because I think by the end it gets lost in the sauce of
yeah.
having Batman and Superman fight each other and then having some Justice League stuff
Yeah.
take over. So it just kind of
Again,
gets
it's
left to the wayside.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say, like, it's like what we talked about. They didn't start with all these characters with their own solo movies. Like they're all just kind of thrown
yeah,
in together here, and it's the last third of the movie. Like here they are. Here's kind of the Justice League.
yeah. I think I want to, because like I think I like these films enough that like after maybe 5 to 10 years of not seeing them and wanting to like go back, I would like to rewatch them just to get another set of fresh eyes on them. And I
Yep.
think I've kind of made up my mind of like wanting to do an in universe chronological rewatch, because I think having seen Wonder Woman beforehand, you might get a little bit more context for her character in
Yep.
BvS. Um, so, but like Batman not getting his own film kind of sucks
Yep.
before this movie. So like, yeah, you're introducing a bunch of new characters and stuff. Lex Luthor as well. Lex Luthor was a big weak spot for me as well.
Mm,
Wasn't a big fan of Eisenberg's take on the character.
no.
I don't really have much of a reference for Lex Luthor. I don't know much about him. But I just wasn't sold on the like weird, like whiny rich kid psychopath
Yeah,
take.
it's
It
not
felt
great.
very odd. So
Yeah. And then even
yeah.
then, there's a lot of like past references, especially with Batman. Obviously, Robin's dead in this universe, and then we get no
Hmm.
explanation of what happens. Obviously, if you've read the comics, you know what happens, and that's kind of what they're referencing.
Hmm.
But even then, like Robin's dead, but we don't know why that happened. You know, how does Bruce feel about it? Obviously, it's not great for him, but like he never really
Hmm.
mentions it either. So it's yeah, there's a lot of stuff where it's like they're just throwing it out there, and they expect you to kind of jump on for the ride. And I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
people do that. Like a lot of moviegoers weren't sitting at home reading any
No.
comics to get prepared because why would they? Like they're
Well,
especially at that point when
I
Marvel
was one of
was
those.
yeah
Yeah, I was one of those people because like my only like prior knowledge was Man of Steel, and then
yeah
I guess the Nolan films, like that's the most exposure I've had to DC characters at that time. So
yeah
like going in, like I vividly remember like saying to you like, I don't know what's going on in this movie, man. Like I'm
yeah.
pretty lost of like
And
who
you're the
these
vast
characters
majority.
are, how this fits in. Yeah, exactly. So um, and especially because it was the same year that Marvel was doing their version of this with Civil War.
Yep.
And you just look at the stark contrast of thinking how Civil War, I think I counted it when I rewatched BvS, but like it had 13 movies or something like
Yeah.
that
To lead up to
before.
that.
Yeah. And granted, not all of them were like as relevant as others, right? But
Yep.
like both Iron Man and Captain America by Civil War at that point will have had entire trilogies dedicated to each other, basically.
Yep.
And then you have a litany of other things happening in that film. Two Avengers films have passed by then.
Yeah.
So it's like, and then you get BVS where you had one film before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They just
like,
were like, here's our two most famous characters. I hope you've read comics and I hope you know their backstories because here they are.
yeah,
They're going to fight each other. And that was kind of like their
exactly.
entire plan, which didn't work.
No, it fumbles a lot, but I think kind of contextualizing it in that brain space of kind of as a prologue rather than a solo movie or like a team up movie. Because like even as a solo ensemble movie, it doesn't really work that well either. Um, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. It's towards the lower half. There's just some utter trash in this universe, so it doesn't quite. It was near the bottom, but like recontextualizing everything, especially since I hadn't seen a few of the movies, um, I think it's like just below average in
Yeah.
regards to looking at the list.
It's not
Um,
great.
I yeah. Uh, from there, what is it? Then we get Suicide Squad, which, speaking of the bottom of the barrel and the bottom of my
Yeah.
list, like I will never rewatch this movie. It's like the only thing it has going for it is Margot Robbie
Hmm.
as Harley Quinn. I think
That's
that
it.
was like a match made in heaven of casting. And there's two other movies with her in it that are
Yeah.
substantially better, in my opinion,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, even
So,
yeah, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Birds of Prey, but it's way better than this movie. Like I remember
yeah.
being pretty excited for this movie when it first came out, And by midway point, I was like, what is this? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Why am I still here? Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
again, like you said, it's a movie that, like, when will I ever want to rewatch this movie? Probably never.
And
Like, it's
it
so bad.
it's it also, this is one of the examples of this universe. You can just like not have seen any of these films and be like, okay, there's two versions of the Suicide Squad in this universe, and there's two versions of the Justice League in this universe. So, like, what is going on with this
Yeah,
universe that there needs to have this happen? Right.
yeah,
And it's not like they're sequels or like whatever, they're two separate versions of the same teams.
yeah,
And it's just like, it makes you wonder, like, how did we get here? Um,
yeah.
but I mean, obviously, we hadn't got to that point when this movie actually came out. But this movie is just real bad. There's so much just lazy exposition of like, here's this character and what they do, and some like really gaudy special effects that really
Yeah,
don't relate much to anything of like introducing what they do and like trying to
no.
pull off humor. Um,
Yeah,
some
it's
really
very much a
contrived plot points.
yeah, it's very much a
Yeah,
here's a movie with a bunch of characters and it's gonna try and make you laugh, but it's not funny. And then it's like it's gonna
yeah.
try and bring you in with like this big plot, and it's like, no, none of this works. Like Enchantress,
It's
not
so
great.
convoluted of like they're they've deployed Enchantress on a Suicide Squad mission, I think, but then she breaks free and then she ends up being the big bad with her
Yeah,
brother or whatever. And so they have to go clean up their own mess. And then there's like a twist of like Waller being the one they have to go save and rescue from
yeah,
the destruction of the city. And like then you have all this
it's
stuff with
so.
Jared Leto's Joker. Jared Leto's
Oh
Joker
yeah,
is atrocious.
Will Smith
Um,
playing Will Smith.
well, yeah, I remember him being one of like the highlights of the movie for me when I
Oh
had first
really?
seen
I
it,
walked
but
away
on the
from that movie
rewatch,
being like,
it's
he is like, he just seems like he's just Will Smith.
he's
Like
there, he's phoning it in. Yeah.
yeah, I did not like him. Like, again, Margot Robbie is the only portion of this movie that I liked. I haven't seen it since it came
Hmm.
out. I went, I want to say opening weekend, and
Hmm.
I can't remember a whole lot about this movie other than I remember being halfway through and being like, this sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. It is not something that needs to be revisited ever again. Um, if somehow in some sort of like lightning in a bottle circumstance the Ayer cut somehow exists and gets released, maybe I'll check it out, but that's a very big maybe.
Yeah, I
There's
don't know
so,
how
like
it
you
can be
said,
improved. Like, really, what is he
no.
gonna do that's gonna improve it? Like, they're not gonna
Yeah.
go back and
Take
reshoot
out
it.
all of the take out all of the like needle drop moments with all of the big like Queen and freaking Kanye West songs playing and stuff back to
Oh,
back. It is so bad, dude. I had
yeah,
whiplash from the amount of soundtrack songs that played back to back. It is,
yeah.
oh,
It
it's
feels
rough.
like they were trying to do Guardians of the Galaxy, but with Suicide Squad and just completely butchering every single portion of it. All the music
Yeah.
sucked, the team sucked, the acting
Yeah.
sucked, the plot sucked. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
again, one of the things where it was pretty obvious they were trying to do a Marvel movie in the DCU and just completely failed.
Hmm. Yeah. Fell flat on its face. Um, and then we go to Wonder Woman, I believe. I think that's the next one.
That
Uh,
sounds right.
and yeah, substantial step up for sure.
Yeah,
Uh, it is. It's where is it on my list? It's number 5.
yeah,
Um,
fair enough.
I think it's solid overall. I really liked all the Themyscira stuff.
Hmm.
I wish we got to see them more. One kind of nitpicky thing I'll mention at the top of the discussion. They say uh, Diana can never return to Themyscira, and she's like,
Yeah.
"I know," but they never elaborate on like why. Because like
Well,
ships can just come in,
yeah.
obviously, at
When do
will.
they
So
elaborate in any of these movies? They just kind of put stuff out there
I
and hope
mean,
people, like, that's what they do. Like, so why would that be
yeah,
any different? But yeah, I
yeah,
agree. I think it's a pretty good
exactly.
movie. I mean, I don't think Gal Gadot is a great Wonder Woman. Like, I don't think she's very good. but she kind of
I
pulls
think
it off. Like, she's fine. Like, she's not
she
Jared
pulled
Leto
off
Joker
the
bad, but
no.
I honestly I forgot he was in Suicide Squad until you said it. I'm like, oh yeah, he was in that movie.
You
I've
betcha,
erased
dude.
him from my memory. He is so bad in that
That's
role. I can't believe they
he is.
went with Jared Leto as the Joker.
Oh, dude.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
how he continues to get work now is
Oh
beyond me.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah,
oh man.
we don't need to
Sorry,
spend
that's
any
so
more
bad. Oh,
time or brain cells on. Yeah,
yeah.
uh, I think Gal Gadot did the kind of fish out of water thing. I think they might have laid that on a little too thick at times
Hmm.
throughout the film, and
Yeah.
like make her come off as a little too stupid, uh, because she seems like very capable. She knows like multiple languages. She's a very competent warrior and everything.
Yeah.
Um, so they maybe laid that shtick on a little bit too much at times, but I still think she did that kind of wondrous, that like fascination with the real world thing pretty well. And there were a couple comedic moments as well, like trying to
Yeah.
figure out how you're supposed to fight in a dress, like a ball gown type thing, is
Yeah.
still pretty funny. Um, but I think the large part of that, Chris Pine is just so charismatic, and I
Yeah,
think
he's very good.
he really sold the kind of dynamic between her and him, um, because he's just like so good.
Yeah.
He was definitely one of the highlights of the film for sure.
I think one of
Uh,
the biggest flaws is that it came out after Batman v Superman. I think you nailed it on the head. This should have been the second movie in this universe, right after
yeah.
Man of Steel. Like, pushing her into Batman v Superman makes a lot of sense, really. But we have no
Hmm.
background information on her, and then we get it a couple years later. It's just, again, the world building here is so bad, and the fact that they thought that, oh yeah, people, like, obviously that's their big three. People know these
Hmm.
characters, but these are new versions. Like, you can't just go in expecting people to be like, oh, this is Wonder Woman, I know exactly what's going on. Like, but yeah,
Exactly.
for the
Yeah.
most part, this movie's pretty good. Like, there's not really a whole
Yeah.
lot to say that's,
the
negative
the
compared to.
biggest problem for me is the ending, the final act.
Mhm.
Like this easily feels like it could have been. I try to avoid doing this too much, and maybe it's something I got to keep working on. But like, you can always, like, hindsight is 2020, and you can always kind of be like, oh, I think they should have done it this way, and it can be
Yeah.
re-edited. But like the ending, it feels like there was a very clear point where they could have been like, okay, this is where we're taking the character. um, and there's still a couple like character beats and plot things that can still happen, especially regarding Chris Pine's character, Steve Trevor, I think his name is.
Yep.
um, they can still do that without feeling obligated to bring in this like goofy CGI fight between Wonder Woman and God of War. So, and having that like weird twist.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's the biggest offender for me. Everything else felt pretty good, and it would have been a good jumping off point for seeing where we see, or uh, seeing where we go with Diana's character in BvS and Justice League.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's really my only problem, because everything else is quite good, especially a lot of the action. I also do think the action's cool, but I think something about the DCEU in general, maybe it's just because they chose to have all their characters go this fast. They
Yeah.
really lay on the slow motion in a lot of
Yeah.
their fight sequences, and it gets a little old. Especially in Wonder Woman, I noticed it a lot. It's like every
Another
time
one.
she like fights somebody, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Uh, Overall, though, still really enjoy it. And yeah,
Definitely one
just
of the
so
top
weird.
movies that's at that point. Like, it's still, I would
Yeah.
definitely recommend it if you have no, knowledge of Wonder Woman. Like, definitely watch the movie. Like, it at least,
Hmm.
hopefully it helps with the next set. I don't know if they're sticking with Gal Gadot, but I mean, we'll see.
I think, yeah, I think as far as the news surrounding the whole new universe goes, I think where we're at is James Gunn said something along the lines of like, they won't be the Wonder Woman and the Aquaman, like
Yeah.
James Momoa or Jason Momoa,
Jason. Yeah.
Jesus. They won't be the like official like
same characters,
banner
but the same
people.
characters at the
Yeah,
same time.
but they might be able to come back in future projects for certain things. So,
Which
but
I
yeah,
don't like.
this one,
I think you just start fresh. Like, even
yeah,
like, you're getting a new Batman, you're getting a
I
new
agree.
Superman, so why take half the team and be like, here's what they were before, but they're completely different, but also the same.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, and you got to wonder as well. This is all kind of hearsay, really, at
yeah,
this point, too, right? It's all Twitter discussions and Twitter
yeah,
threads. So it's like, I imagine a large part of it is probably just James Gunn and Peter Safran delivering very political answers of like,
mm,
well, we've got a lot of balls in the air, so we might revisit it in the future. They're not trying to draw any definitive lines in the sand
yeah,
because like, and I mean, especially with all the like multiverse stuff and Crisis on Infinite Earths type
yeah,
things
true,
that could
yeah,
happen in the future. It's like they want to leave doors open and opportunities open. So, but yeah, I still quite enjoy Wonder Woman. Um, and then we get to go to the Josstice League, which, wow, what a movie it is!
yep.
It's a feature length film that got released into theaters.
Very much like Suicide Squad. I watched it halfway through. I'm like, oh my god, what is going on here? What? Why? Like,
It's
you
just,
you're
yeah,
trying to you
man.
tried to build around the Justice League right off the beginning, and throw them into Batman v Superman, and then you give them an actual Justice League movie, and you can't even do that. Like,
Hmm.
oh man, it's honestly, I'd love to be a fly on the wall back in the day when they were discussing these movies and planning out the universe, because if they really thought this was going to work,
Hmm.
man, how did they fumble the bag so badly?
And to to give any sort of sliver of benefit of the doubt, like there is the whole tragedy with Snyder's family surrounding
Hmm.
this as well, so it's like you're kind of fighting an uphill battle regarding that aspect of the whole thing. um, but it's also not something like, as a studio exec, you can't just shelve it and be like, okay, we'll give Snyder and his family time. When they're ready, he'll come back and finish that project. So it's like that's not within the realm of reality.
No, of course not.
um, I'm thankful we even were able to get the Snyder cut at all.
Yeah,
I'm like really surprised that we ended up getting it in any sort of timeline. But yeah, I mean, the family tragedy and Snyder not being able to finish it is one thing, but then just the direction they took it
yeah.
is just so
Like, do
mind-boggling.
you think the executives walked out of the first screening and were like, "Wow, we got a great movie here"? Were they like thinking this is a disaster, but we got to release it? Because I don't know how you could have watched even the first act without being like, "This is not good," let alone the
Well, and
full.
I also wonder, you have to wonder what this film's outcome would have been if it was the landscape, the Warner Brothers landscape that we have today. Like,
Yeah,
because with all of the test screenings and the tax write-off, like
yeah,
films that aren't getting released, like you have to wonder, like, would this have made the cut, or
probably not.
would they have just written it off? And like, I wonder if like they could have even maybe salvaged it into just being like a Justice League Part 1 and like
Yeah,
kind of saved face that way, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of what ifs, right?
yeah,
But yeah, it's just so like haphazard in its construction. It feels like duct taped together.
yeah,
It's just, there's there's scenes like the Themyscira stuff comes out of nowhere.
hmm,
Like that felt like a scene that should have started like the movie.
yeah.
All of the mother box stuff feels like
Oh, it's
it's
so
just getting
bad.
pummeled at you, and it's
Yeah,
it's it's either like being expositorily pummeled at you, or there's no context for them at all. So it's
yeah.
like
There's
you're
nothing. Like, they don't explain anything. It's just like, this is what it is, and this is what it's gonna do. But any background information not given.
yeah.
Like, they just expect their
Yeah,
characters to kind
like
of carry
the
it.
flashback sequence is like very expository and as well, right? Yeah, it's so rough. The Superman stuff feels so rushed as well. It's like, okay, we got to bring him back so he's there for
Yep.
the final act, right? Um,
Yeah.
The
Man, is
pacing,
that bad.
like, and we talk about introducing new characters out of nowhere in BvS, but like you're introducing half of the Justice League in the
Yeah.
Justice League movie, and
Hmm.
it's like, what? What are we
Yeah.
doing?
How did they not learn that, Batman v Superman wasn't well received, or they did the exact same thing
Yeah,
and they're like, you know what we should do? Double down and do it again. It's like,
yeah, and like Snyder, like the Snyder cut is technically the same thing. At least we get more time with them. So
mhm.
it's more of a just like comparatively, the Snyder cut is better in that regard of giving the new characters time to be more fully fleshed
It's
out.
also double the
Um,
length, so that's probably why. But
exactly.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like,
they should be if it's double the length, right?
yeah,
So yeah,
jeez.
it's the Steppenwolf. Like he looks god awful.
Yeah.
He's just such a generic villain. Like we
Hmm.
don't know anything about him in
No.
this movie and like why he's there other than like plain Jane world domination type shit, right?
Yeah.
And he just looks
Yeah.
so bad. He looks like he's ripped straight from a video game cutscene.
Yeah. And not
Um
like this generation, like 3 generations ago, like early
yeah,
PS3.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So it's just so all over the place, so tonally inconsistent with Snyder's stuff.
Yeah. But
Um
even like the Snyder, I know that's probably next to Snyder Cut, but I don't know. I don't find it to be that much better. Like it's a little bit better because yeah, you get a lot more of it, but man, this whole idea of Justice League is just, oh man, not good.
it's really just a case of like no version of it is gonna work. Like it
No.
has to be like a back to formula Willem Dafoe type thing
Yeah.
where like they need that hard reset, and that's kind of finally where we're getting
Yeah.
all these years later. But yeah, and just comparing it to the Snyder Cut, man, it's just like it magnifies it even more of being like, how did this get released? How does this exist?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Snyder Cut isn't quite next, but we will get there. This is kind of the beginning of where they're like, okay, we're gonna take a minute. We're gonna start establishing our characters, and we're gonna start giving people or giving characters solo films and focus on them one by one. Um, and this for me is where the beginning of the like good streak starts is with Aquaman. Although I say good streak, it's
It's fine.
the asterisk and the context surrounding this whole DCEU is like you have to take it with a grain of salt. It's like it's
Yeah.
good, but
Yeah.
it's really not good
It's
at
like
the same
yeah, it's a
time.
6 out of 10. It's like it's watchable. Like it would have been better if it was
Yeah,
earlier to establish a character. Like
right.
it's kind of on the level of Thor, right? Where like the first Thor movie isn't great, but at least it introduces you to the character, to the world, to the
Hmm.
all the Thor characters and the background characters. But
I
at this
mean,
point,
say
it's
what you
like
will about Thor. Yeah, it like at least it gives Thor a through line arc, right? It
exactly.
introduces Loki. Loki is amazing. He's one of the best
Yeah.
parts of that movie. You get
Imagine if they
introduced
didn't
to
do Thor and they
Asgard
just
and
had
everything.
Avengers, the first Avengers before
Yeah.
Thor came out, and like Loki's there and
Thor
Thor's
just
there. It's like
shows
what?
up attacking
It's
the
like, what?
plane, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah. That's what
yeah,
the DCU thought was great. They're just like, yeah, let's just introduce a bunch of characters and hope it works. Like we watched
yeah.
the MCU do it right. Let's do it completely wrong and see if people like it.
Yeah. Let's see what happens. Yeah. No, Aquaman seriously does have shortcomings for sure. But I will be an Aquaman apologist. This rewatch, uh, like I gained a new level of like admiration for the film. James Wan is just such a visionary filmmaker, and I think this did come out. Yeah, this came out a few years after Furious 7. Furious 7 was his first, I guess, like big action
Yeah,
blockbuster type movie. Um, but he's just such a visionary, and he does such creative things as a filmmaker. There's so many very cool sequences. But like some of his style does he like his style gets in his own way sometimes. Like the jump scare cut like explosion cuts uh are like so overdone in this movie. It's ridiculous. Like it feels so like uh it's borderlining on parody almost.
yeah,
Um but like Jason Momoa is like magnetic.
Yep.
His performance is so good. He's a great Aquaman. And it's just like it can be so cheesy at times where it's like his first line is like permission to come aboard when he comes onto the
Yeah.
submarine. Um, and like the action's really cool. A lot of the music is pretty gnarly. And just like the scope, I think that like you could have easily done like 3 Aquaman movies out of this script alone, I think, and really given it time. Like it feels so like operatic and
Yeah.
grand. Like you're introducing all of the like different kingdoms of the sea, and there's so much like lore behind all of these different kingdoms and how Atlantis fell and what's the deal with the deserters in the Sahara
Yeah.
and like the trench. I mean, like James Wan even gets to put his stamp as a horror filmmaker on the film with the trench sequence. It's so cool, so visually interesting. Um, and there's a lot of really cool things he does in this film. It just doesn't gel all the time, and it's
Yeah.
like the script is probably the weakest part of being so expository. And it's just like it just feels like noise washing over you a lot of the time. Um, I think as far as performances go, though, I think like Jason Momoa is fantastic.
Yep.
Uh, uh, Patrick Wilson, I thought was really cool. He gets to like ham it up a little bit as Ocean Master. I thought he
Yeah.
was great. I think Dolph Lundgren is there, and I think Willem Dafoe is a little underutilized for the
Yeah.
film. I really think they could have used him better, and I think again, kind of could have been better utilized in um, like if you had split this story up more and given him a little bit more time with like young Arthur Curry. Uh, and yeah, like I actually think he was used better in the Justice League, like the Snyder cut, than he was
Yeah.
in his own film or in Aquaman's film. But yeah, there's just a lot of really cool stuff that I really like in Aquaman, and uh, it's definitely one of the like more favorite films in this universe. You said you've seen parts of it, right? You
Yeah, I
hadn't
had it
actually
on
seen it
just kind
start to
of
finish.
background noise just when I was doing stuff, and I thought it was all right.
Mhm.
Like Jason Momoa is a great Aquaman. Like he really
Yeah.
sells the character. But yeah, I think the plot
Mhm.
never really grasped me, and I was just like, I don't really care. But
Yeah.
that's one I'll probably actually
There.
go back and rewatch just because I remember being like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's like Shazam. Like
Mhm.
I did the same thing with Shazam. I just kind of had it on in the background when I was doing stuff. It's pretty good. And then I just never went back
Mhm.
to actually watch it. It's probably because I was doing other
Right.
stuff and I was like, I can't remember what's going on. I got to restart. And then I just never did it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very plot heavy and a lot of like moving parts and different MacGuffins and like wild goose chases that they get sent on. Um, and some like half baked character motivations as well. But just as like a fun operatic like action blockbuster,
Yeah.
it's really cool, and it has some really visually interesting sequences. So I
Especially
still
for a
really like
character that
it.
kind of gets shit on a lot. Like Aquaman is kind of
Yeah,
dubbed
right.
the
What a
uncool character.
reinvention
Like
of the character.
yeah, Jason
Yeah,
Momoa, like he's a badass and he's awesome in this role. Like that was the right choice for this character because I mean, obviously, like Family Guy,
totally.
like they constantly make fun of him, and you see that all the time.
Yeah,
It's like I get
yeah,
why because Aquaman isn't necessarily
totally.
the
He
coolest
talks to
character, but
fish.
yeah, but it's
Yeah.
like if it's Jason Momoa, like how can you not be like this guy's fucking cool?
Yeah. Well, then, like, especially with some of the sequences they do in this film, of like, it's kind of fucking awesome to see a dude with a trident
Yeah,
riding this like mega kaiju underwater in this
yeah,
huge like inter or like kingdoms battling each other, right? Like,
yeah,
it's pretty freaking awesome.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I still really like this film as much as it has its downfalls or pitfalls. Speaking of Shazam, that's the next solo film. That is my number 2 for the list. It's just so fun. It really uh, takes advantage of the concept of a dumb teenager getting superhero powers.
yeah.
Um, it like Zachary Levi and Jack Dylan Grazer's dynamic is fantastic. Zachary Levi really is able to nail the kind of spirit of a teenager a lot more than he does in the sequel for this film. Like it feels like he's doing a caricature of himself in the sequel, and lays it on a bit too thick. But there's an earnestness in the first one that I think is like missing from the sequel.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's got some really fun moments. Like I think the villain is like kind of forgettable. Mark Strong is okay. Like I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think he gets much material to work with. But like the effects are quite well done. David F. Sandberg, another director from the Conjuring universe as well, weirdly enough. There's a couple like really dark moments in that film as well, that do kind of help balance out the levity of the kids discovering one of them as a superhero. The whole Shazam family at the end sequence is really fun. And the themes throughout the whole film, I think maybe you could have dived a little bit more into the character work of like Billy Batson. Um, but I think the skeletal structure is there for the most part, and then also just having the fun kind of consistent Christmas theme throughout as
Yeah.
well really lends itself to the whole themes of family and everything. Um, yeah, it's just super fun, uh, and one of the only films in this universe. Like it's such a stark contrast to a lot of the films, especially early
Yeah.
on, like Justice League and Man of Steel, even like Black Adam,
Yeah.
yeah, and Suicide Squad. So
Yeah,
yeah,
this is another one
I
that
really
I
liked it
actually
again.
will probably go back and rewatch at some point just because it does seem like a fun movie. And again, I think I made it maybe halfway through and I was like, yeah, this is good. But yeah, just
Hmm.
have not went back and rewatched it.
Yeah, and it it was really depressing doing the rewatch of the first film because like I was like, oh yeah, I really like it because it had been a while since I had seen it. Um, and then I rewatched the sequel as well, and it's just such a disappointment, man. But
Yeah.
we'll get to that in a bit. I think the next film is Birds of Prey, so number 3 on my list, uh, and the fantabulous Emancipation of Harley Quinn, one of the most audacious titles
Okay.
of a movie.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, man, I don't know. I was like, I think the discourse surrounding this film after having seen it, uh, like, and it just being in the zeitgeist for a few years now, uh, like there was a lot of discourse surrounding it, and that kind of I think lended to my negative perception of it,
Yep.
uh, and the memory of seeing it. I think I was pretty middled on it the first time around when I saw it in theaters. Um, and yeah, I just kind of regarded it as one of like the lesser entries, but rewatching it, I had a lot of fun. Again, I mean, you can't go wrong with Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. I
Hmm.
think they give her a
Steals the
lot of
show again.
material to work with. Yep. She's badass, she's funny. Uh, and like I mentioned, the stunt sequences are amazing and as they should be,
Yeah.
with Chad Stileski, the director of the John Wick films, uh, like being at the helm. Um, it's just got some really cool action sequences. Kathy Yan being the director, like having a female director, I think worked really well. I think she like did a great service to not only Harley Quinn but like all of the female characters. It's a predominantly female led
Yep.
cast, and I think it's really well done. It's not one of those films for me that does the girl power trope.
Yeah.
It's not doesn't feel hollow.
Yeah.
Like it feels
Feels very
actually like
genuine.
earned, feels genuine. They don't like just ham fist it and be like, oh, men are bad. Like they actually like, even though the men in this film are very
Are
bad,
bad.
there's
Yeah.
some really brutal sequences. But like it all feels very earned. All the performances feel like genuine. You can
Yeah.
tell like Margot Robbie has a very uh like big love for the character.
Yep.
So um yeah, and it's like it is about her. They don't shoehorn in a Joker performance. Thank God they didn't
Yeah.
bring Jared Leto back. They really learned from that mistake.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, what were your kind of grievances with the film?
The
I'd love to
biggest
know.
was Cassandra Cain, like just going from the comics where she's a badass and then she's just this
Oh, okay.
annoying little character. Like, oh my, every time she was on the screen, I was like, get her off. Like, why? You could have named her anything
Interesting.
else and it would have been
Right.
fine. I think I
Yeah,
would have
yeah.
liked it a bit better. But with the background history of Cassandra Cain, it's just like you have this character that's awesome in the comics and then you just completely make her not what she is. Like I get you want to
Right.
diversify and make things a little different, but I don't know. In that sequence, it was just like
Felt like a weird
I
choice.
didn't like it. Yeah, I mean Black Mask.
Interesting.
I remember liking that whole kind of character. He's kind of flamboyant. He's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, like great
Yeah.
there. Obviously, Margot Robbie. The whole egg sandwich sequence was great. Like that made me laugh. I was dying watching that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and even Huntress was great. I remember liking her quite a bit. But
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, even
this
for the
month, this
limited screen time she has,
yeah,
she's
she's
good.
barely in it, which I think is another
Hmm.
thing. Like you could have introduced these characters and brought them in and made them a bigger part of the movie. But again, it is a Harley Quinn movie, so I guess you got to focus
Hmm.
mainly on her, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, she steals every scene she's in, but this is one
Totally.
I think I probably should go back and rewatch. I think I probably would like it a little bit more going in, knowing that Cassandra Cain isn't the Cassandra Cain. Whereas
Right.
before it was like I heard that's who it was, and I was like, okay, cool, and then it wasn't. So yeah,
Gotcha.
definitely not the worst. Like since we had Suicide Squad before, it was like this is a massive step up. I just didn't love it either. Like it's one of those
Right.
movies was like, yeah, I watched it and haven't watched it again since.
Hmm. Yeah, that's totally fair. Like, especially if they do such big character
Yeah,
departures. Again, like these films are what are really kind of introducing me more to the Justice League and to like just the
yeah,
DC comics in general and DC characters. So I knew nothing about Cassandra Cain
yeah,
going in. So, but yeah, it is interesting that they decided to go with such a wild departure. Um,
yeah. And I don't know
yeah,
why. Like you could have made it, somewhat relevant. Like they don't even tease like anything at all. It's like a completely different character with
yeah.
just the same name. Which
She's
again,
like they end the film with her getting trained by Harley or whatever, but
yeah,
like as far as that goes, it doesn't
yeah,
really mean much. Yeah. Um, no, I completely get those grievances. I hope like whenever you do, if you do decide to rewatch it, I hope you're able to gain some more enjoyment out of it.
yeah.
Um,
It's definitely more fun. Like it doesn't feel ham-fisted like Suicide Squad, where it's
yeah,
like you're gonna have fun with this movie, and then they just beat you over the head.
yeah,
This one, I
yeah,
was like, yeah, I'm
and
having
it's
fun.
yeah, it's also just one of the most stylized films. Like it
Yeah,
has a very like tangible personality to the whole film. Like you might not remember it, but like it opens with like a 2D animated like sequence of like Harley Quinn and Joker and her origins
breaking
and
up. Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Which I thought was really fun. Uh yeah. Um it's one of my favorites for sure. Uh going after this, another female led DC film, Wonder Woman sequel, 1984. I had avoided this one. You haven't seen it still, correct?
no, this was like
Yeah.
mid-pandemic, right? And there was like, were
Hmm.
they gonna release it in
I think it
theaters? Were
was
they
like
not?
one of the first. I think it was one of the first films they decided to launch day and date on HBO Max.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
that sounds right.
so yeah, I had avoided it because of all the discourse surrounding it and all the like really low reviews. It's one of the lowest
Yeah,
reviews on Letterboxd of the bunch. Um, So I was going in with little to no expectations. I was very hesitant on Steve returning, on Chris Pine's character returning,
yeah,
because of the way uh, the first film had wrapped up. I was just like, oh, why are they bringing him back? But honestly, in the context of the film, because it deals with like wishes and everything, I think the way they structure it, I think you can buy into it in some sense. I think it works. And again, Chris Pine is so freaking charismatic, so it's
yeah,
like it's hard not to like enjoy watching him on screen, especially because they do kind of the reverse of the first movie and have him be the fish out of water going from
yeah.
the 40s to the 80s. It's a fun little like character sequence in the middle of the film. The cast again, I think again Gal Gadot is all right. She kind of gets a moment towards the end of the film to kind of stretch her legs emotionally. Um, but otherwise, nothing super notable. Pedro Pascal is the one that steals the show for
Yeah.
that film. He is so good. He like hams it up, dials it up to 11, and like his character gets a surprising sort of arc by the end of the film that I really liked. He was easily the best part of the film. Kristen Wiig, I thought actually was all right as well,
Yeah.
and kind of her through line with the whole wishes concept uh, made sense, especially with how her character ends up. Like, it's one of those characters that you're like, okay, how the hell are we going to pull this off with
Yeah.
Cheetah becoming a villain? Uh, but I think in the context of it, I think it works. I don't know that it's one that I might revisit it one more time just to see if it does hold up, because a
Yeah.
lot of people do not like this film. So maybe some of the cracks will start to finally shine through. But like, I don't know, I had an all right time with it. Um, Again, it's kind of like middle of the road for me, and probably will end up being pretty forgettable.
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, yeah, there's really not much else to say regarding 1984. I think there are some definite big arguments regarding the themes and the subject matter it tries to tackle. Like there's some Palestine Israel conflicts that are touched on, weirdly enough. And there's some, like, because it's in the 80s, some like US government, like Red Scare type things going
Yeah.
on, but they're it's just very weirdly touched on. There's a lot of like um subject matter regarding like nuclear weapons and stuff. It's very
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it will age very well upon a rewatch. um but yeah, now we are getting to the big one, the 4 hour chunk,
Yeah.
Zack Snyder's Justice League. I was very intrigued going into this film, having now seen Justice League by this point.
Yeah.
I was excited to kind of, I will admit, seeing them in such close succession to one another, I couldn't help but be comparative in my
Yeah.
viewing. It probably wasn't as like neutral of a viewing as I could have had, because I was constantly kind of being like, oh, this scene's longer. Oh, these characters are
Yeah.
featured more prominently. Oh,
See,
this scene
where
is
I
different,
was
you know?
years in between, so that's maybe why I
Yeah.
don't like Zack Schneider's version
Okay.
that
That
much
makes
more.
sense.
Because I'm like, I don't know,
Yeah,
this
if you watch the
seems.
Justice League right before, of course the Snyder Cut's
Yeah,
going to seem better. Yeah.
exactly. So I mean, I remember watching it and being like, yeah, this is better, but like, will I ever want to sit down and watch this 4 hour Justice League again? Probably not. And I haven't,
Yeah.
so I guess that kind of answers
Yeah.
my own question.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, I mean, especially considering, or like depending on how things go forward with the new DCU, like if we get a substantially better cinematic universe, you're probably going to want to prioritize that
Yeah.
over the DCEU. So, but yeah, I don't know. I really liked it. I think the biggest thing, again, Snyder has a vision. We get to see this consistent vision like fully realized and carried
Yeah.
through into this.
Fully.
Um,
4 hours fully.
4 hours, yeah. Like it is broken up into segments, which
Hmm.
I think probably helps. They're like broken up into chapters and parts.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, just on every front, man, like the characters are more fully fleshed out. The scenes and characters are given time to breathe.
Yeah.
The whole Themyscira bit, I felt like a lot of the time, like this is a huge film, and it feels thematically huge as well. It felt more like I was watching like a Lord of the Rings movie at times than it was
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
DC superhero movie. Like the Themyscira stuff was awesome. I freaking loved all of that stuff. That was so cool. Um, I mean, Steppenwolf is a substantial
Hmm.
upgrade.
Oh yeah.
Like he's way more menacing. He actually looks so
Yeah.
much better.
Yep.
I love his design with like the spikes flaring up anytime he's like more angry and everything. The introduction of Dark Side and
Yep.
the The anti-life equation was interesting and
Yeah.
intriguing. I was like, I wanted to learn more. It wasn't like this like exposition shit getting washed
Yep.
over me. Um, and he was
Yeah, there's just
terrifying. Like, oh, I mean,
yeah.
Steppenwolf was terrifying too.
Yep.
But like Darkseid, you like, especially in the moment where the portal opens and Flash has to like turn back time a little bit.
Yeah.
I was like, I was not expecting that. I'm like, oh man, this is
Yeah.
shit's getting serious.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just like really overall, everything gets so much more time to breathe,
Yeah.
and you're able to sit with these characters more, a lot more character interactions between the members of
Mhm.
the Justice League, so you kind of get an idea of how their relationships develop between each other. I loved the moment between like Arthur and Diana when they're going to dig up Superman. They're
Yep.
like talking about their people's history together, right? That was a great moment. I loved, again, going back to Willem Dafoe. I thought he was great. His luscious locks in the sea, he looked
Yeah.
awesome. Um,
Yeah.
the like just him talking about his mother's trident, like there's a nice little character beat there of him finally deciding to take it up. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much. What kind of sticks out to you largely, Cole, from what you remember anyway, in
I
terms of
mean, I
like
know I've
kind of
been shitting on it that it's four
highlights
hours
and
long, but you're
lowlights?
right. Like, there's just so much more room to breathe. Like, the character interactions like feel genuine. Where in the original version, it's just like they're here, they're talking, and then that's a new scene. Here, like you at least get to
Yeah,
be with these characters for more than 30 seconds at a time. Yeah.
yeah, you get a sense of who they are.
And yeah, Darkseid, like I'm interested. Oh, he's obviously coming back at some point. Like that's going to be their main big bad, kind of like Thanos was. Like that's the big guy in the DC comic books. Like that's the main villain. So he's coming back at some point.
Yeah.
We'll be interested to see how they reintroduce that character because yeah, I think for the most part they did a good job there. Um,
Hmm.
and then again, reading kind of what Snyder had planned for like the next kind of few Justice League movies, I'm kind of like glad that he didn't get to go through with it because it sounded really, really bad. So
Oh no.
I'm fine with kind of this being it. Um, but at the
Right.
same
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
like wanting to go back and rewatch it, it's like there's so many ideas that are planted that we're obviously going to make a big splash in the next few movies, and then we just never get to see it.
Hmm.
So it's like it
Yeah.
feels like a movie with so many cliffhangers that are never going to be realized. So it's like
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those movies
100%.
that I didn't love enough where I'm going to go back and rewatch it again. So
Right.
yeah, we'll see. It might be the one that I just go back and just to see kind of again. I watched it when it first came out on HBO, and that
Hmm.
was it. Like a lot of these movies are kind of one and done. Other than Man
Yeah.
of Steel and Suicide Squad, those are like the only ones that I've seen multiple times. So
Hmm.
yeah, and the length again is just like to sit down and be like I'm watching
It's a big
4 hours
undertaking.
is yeah, and like originally they were just going to do 4 episodes, like 4 hour long episodes, and I thought that was a good
Right.
idea
Yeah.
because then you can easily break it up. Like I guess you can pause, but it
Yeah.
doesn't feel
Totally.
the same. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, I'm not a Zack Schneider hater. I think he's does some good stuff and some bad stuff. like I
Yeah.
don't know, he's one of those guys where it's like he's really hit and miss for me. I love Watchmen, and the rest I'm kind of like, it's fine.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that. Um, it's just like I feel like I'm probably pretty similar. I'm pretty neutral, I would say, on Zack
Yeah,
Snyder.
we're like the few
Uh
people that are neutral on him, which is weird. Like the discourse on
yeah.
Twitter that you see with him is just wild to
Well,
me.
and I think part of the reason I never checked out the Snyder Cut as well is the internet discourse surrounding that whole film, like
Yeah,
all the toxic fanboys like embracing this release the Snyder Cut stuff. I just
yeah,
really left a sour taste in my mouth of like, I'm okay. I'm not
hmm
going to watch this.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, having kind of distanced myself from that now, and kind of going in a little bit more neutral again. um, I do appreciate and I guess this also just kind of speaks to how the whole Hollywood blockbuster landscape is nowadays. It's like we take for granted the singular vision in these big movies, right?
yeah,
Because like oftentimes it boils down to a lot of studio intervention and a lot of lowest common denominator and trying to please the masses,
yep,
right? So it's like if nothing else, I commend the direction that he had going for this film. Um, yeah, and like I, especially after watching this, I'm very surprised he hasn't dipped his toe into limited series storytelling,
Yeah.
because like if honestly, if you just take Man of Steel, BvS, and uh the Snyder cut, you get basically like a 10 episode like
Yeah.
limited series effectively.
Yeah.
So I would love to see, because like he makes long ass movies. So
Yeah.
I don't know why he hasn't entertained the idea of doing like an 8 episode like limited like show, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get that in the future. I'm very interested to see how his style of filmmaking could complement that, especially because like the money is there too now, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
Game of
Yeah.
Thrones, Disney Plus shows, the money's there. Stuff can look like it was meant for theaters.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there just feels like there's no reason not to.
Yeah. He's already
Uh,
halfway there, right? Like,
yeah,
why
exactly.
not
Yeah.
try it? Like, maybe you
It
strike
well,
gold and
exactly, yeah, that like I would love to see it because it might actually enhance his
yeah.
take on storytelling. So fingers crossed. I'd love to see him tackle something going forward. Um, but yeah, I came away very pleased with the Snyder cut. It's definitely one of the better. It's I have it at number 6 out of everything. So
Yeah.
it's like, as far as ensemble films goes, it's right behind the Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, after the Snyder cut, now uh, we get, speaking of the Suicide Squad, that is next up on the list. It's both of our absolute favorite
Number one.
films.
Yep.
There was a reason, like, all three Guardians films are so beloved. James Gunn knows how to handle like the runts of the litter and like the
Hmm.
outcasts.
Yep.
Um, and I guess given the landscape of like the context surrounding this film, he also gets to like have a little fun and poke a little fun at the kind of history of the Suicide Squad as
Yep.
well too, right? Um, and yeah, he brings back the best parts of what worked with some of the characters. Like Harley Quinn was a smart choice. Even Rick Flag gets a bit
Yep.
of a redemption in this one. He gets to poke fun at like Deadshot and Bloodsport and
Yeah.
Peacemaker and all that
Oh
too,
God,
right?
Peacemaker.
Um, Stylistically, it's so much better.
Yeah.
And giving it that hard R rating, it was a smart
Right
choice,
choice.
especially with a
Hmm.
group like the Suicide Squad. Like that first scene on the beach, man, is such a
So
great
good.
tone setter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
What
think
are
this
your kind
movie.
of big stands out?
Yeah. I mean, start to finish, I love this movie. Starro, great villain. Like, he's another big
Right.
villain in the DC comics. So seeing him was
Hmm.
awesome. Harley Quinn, obviously, Margot Robbie nails it. John Cena is honestly one of my favorite parts of the DCU. Like, I don't know if we're going to talk about Peacemaker at all, but I fucking love that show so much. It might be my number one. Like, out of all the DCU stuff,
Oh,
Peacemaker
oh
might be
man,
number one. I
dude.
love that
Okay,
show
so
so much.
I'll admit I still haven't watched it, and I didn't
Got
do
to.
it for this rewatch, but it's top of the list. I do
Yep.
still really want to see it. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Like, if you love the Suicide Squad, it's kind of a continuation. It's very funny. Like, I don't think I've laughed that hard in a while. Like, just watching that, like, I still like a lot of people that I know and talk to haven't seen it, so I can't even
Hmm.
quote it or anything. But there's so many moments that I think are so funny. Like, oh
Yeah.
man, he nailed it. I'm so excited he's doing a season 2 for it. And
Hmm.
then yeah, like the setup in this movie with Peacemaker is great. Like, John Cena nails it. Um, and then
Yeah.
I don't want to
It's
jump too far ahead. Whereas, like, I love John Cena, whereas like The Rock, I can't stand. I don't think he's a good actor, so that kind of made
right.
me not want to watch Black Adam. So like,
Well, yeah.
I
There's a
won't jump
whole
too
bag of
far.
worms I think we could get
Yeah,
into with that conversation, because like especially reading the reviews for Black Adam, it just feels so safe, and Dwayne Johnson feels like such a safe movie star. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't, whereas like John Cena and Dave Bautista are a little more
Yep.
risky, and I think
Hmm.
that has paid off in dividends for them as actors.
Yeah.
Dwayne Johnson just feels way more safe with his roles and his production mindset. So I think that's part of the large difference between those two actors for sure.
Yeah.
John Cena's amazing. He was
Oh,
like one
I
of the
love
best
John
parts
Cena.
of the movie. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, really, the whole cast is amazing.
Yeah. The
Again,
team
Harley
is
Quinn
so
gets
much
even
better.
more.
Like
Yeah,
than the first movie. Like everyone,
yeah,
like they're kind of castaways, whereas the first one they're all castaways, but like you don't like any of them. Like
no,
even Harley Quinn
yeah,
in the first Suicide Squad, I'm like, why do I care? Like Margot Robbie's awesome, but
yeah,
I don't really care. But in this one, like the
yeah.
entire time, I was like, Ratcatcher is great, Bloodsport's great.
Hmm.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
such a like, and coming from Marvel, like I can't believe he was able to nail kind of the same formula in a sense. Like
Hmm.
so it's a team up of people that nobody really knows about, but he makes you care about all the characters in a matter of 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Well, and I think also, especially just given the context surrounding all of the behind the scenes of that whole thing, it's the second go at the Suicide Squad by that point too, right? James Gunn had
Yep.
just like been let go from Disney and wasn't going to end up doing Guardians 3. He got
Yep.
hired by DC to do this film. So I think surrounding that whole film, there was a lot less red tape and restrictions. They were just
Yeah.
like, do whatever you want, man. Like, this is your baby. Make it what you want. And I think it really shows. Like, the hard R, all of the funny like moments are amazing. All of the action is really well done. Yeah, it just was firing on all cylinders. I think my only real big gripe with it, and I like the Starro segment is really good. I do just think like in terms of maybe like trimming the fat and
Hmm.
just like sort of from a more pacing standpoint, I think there's like a definitive moment where they kind of like complete their mission. They're all still kind of fully realized characters and fully um, like their arcs have been fulfilled. Uh, and then you kind of get into that big climactic like CGI battle
Yep.
sequence. But to its credit, it's one of the most unique final act
Yep.
superhero final acts ever. So that definitely gets brownie points for sure. I do think it just has a bit of a weak kind of transition moment from like them completing their mission to like, okay, now
Yep.
we have to go do this thing again. And then the movie goes on for another like 15-20 minutes or so.
Yep.
But it's still really good. Uh, yeah, I don't think I have much bad to say about the film
No,
beyond that.
especially
It's
coming
just
off not only just the other Suicide Squad movie, like just the rest. Like that was such a great refresher moment for this
totally,
universe. And it's
yeah,
obvious why they were like, yeah, here are the keys to the car. You're driving now.
yeah, yeah,
Because James Gunn kind of
totally.
knows what he's doing. Obviously, it's a little
Hmm.
bit different when you're the seer of the entire universe. And we'll see what he
Yeah.
does with
Well,
Superman
but
because he
he has
hasn't had
had
like.
keep
Sorry, I
going.
was just
Go
gonna
ahead.
say we
Finish.
haven't seen him like take on a character like Superman before. Like that's a big one. Like
Yeah. Hmm.
if that fails, like they're fucked. Like I don't know what they do. Like I think he's gonna nail it. Like I if there's one guy who I'd be like completely comfortable doing any superhero movie, I think it's him. But if it
Hmm.
doesn't go well, like what do they do after that? Like they're
Oh God, dude, I don't know. I don't know. But like I think the other thing too, the read I get as well a lot of the time, especially from all the like online interactions he has with fans and stuff, and like all of the press stuff surrounding this whole reset is like they are taking their time. They are making sure they get these things right so that they are able to deliver great movies for the
Mhm.
fans. So I think there's a level of faith there. Um, but like he has had experience in the successful cinematic
Yep.
universe world and the behind the scenes, so he has a lot of experience that he can bring over to this. He knows what the inner workings look like. It's a little different, again, like you said,
Yep.
from a director's chair being in that space, that filmmaking space, whereas where you're in charge of it all, right? But I mean,
Yep.
he has the help of Peter Safran, so
Mhm.
um
And he
I
seems to
think
genuinely love these characters too. Like he goes back and forth with
totally.
fans. Like it's not like
Yeah.
he's behind a wall and you just don't hear from him. Like he's the head of this entire universe now, and he's still
Yeah.
going back and forth with fans and explaining what's kind of going on. Obviously, not giving away any of the big secrets, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not overly worried about how they're gonna move forward, especially with Suicide Squad. Like it's such a good movie.
Yeah. I think the risks we run down the line in a few years will probably just be whether it comes down to kind of how the Marvel machine has become of like
Hmm.
more studio intervention seeps in. Um, or it's kind of the two ends of the spectrum of like James Gunn doesn't quite get as much control and it's more studio intervention down the line, or it's the other extreme of like kind of the George Lucas prequels type problem where
Too
like
much. Yeah.
maybe too much control, right? Yeah. And like he's
Yeah.
just surrounded by yes men at that point, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so far in the
promising
future.
start,
Like
hopefully.
that's
Yeah.
problems for like 10 years from now, which is wild to
Yeah,
think about.
exactly. Yeah. Like Endgame, like post Endgame is really where Marvel started having problems.
Yeah.
So,
But they nailed
um,
it into that point. Like, sure, there are
exactly.
some weaker
That was 10
movies, but
years alone, right?
yeah, exactly. And they nailed it. So
So,
let's see what he can do. Like, he's starting with
mhm,
Superman, which is the right call. So we'll
mhm.
see.
Yeah. Yeah, Suicide Squad is amazing. I don't know if you want to add any more thoughts on Peacemaker because that's technically the next thing after the Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
But
I mean, if it slipped under the radar for you and you're a DC fan, you have to watch it. It's so funny, like just
mhm.
legitimately. And it's not very long. I already got my
It's going
episodes
to be like
wrong
8 episodes,
earlier.
right? Yeah.
It's yeah, it's not very long. Like I ripped through it in like 2 weeks, and it's yeah. John Cena's fantastic. Yeah, just again, if there's any issue with James Gunn in your opinion moving forward, like Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, watch them if you don't love them. I don't know what to tell you, man. Those are honestly they might be my two of my favorite. Like I love Guardians 1, but Peacemaker might be right up there with it. I love that show.
Wow. Holy
Yeah, I
cow.
love it. It's
Oh my
so funny.
God. Damn. Okay. All right. Um, yeah, I definitely want to check that out. But I didn't unfortunately get it's just a time constraint thing
Yeah,
really at this
fair
point.
enough.
But yeah. Black Adam is the next thing where we get to kind of go a little bit more. Obviously, you haven't seen it,
Yeah,
so we
and
won't
like I
spend too
said,
much time.
the main thing was like at that point we already knew it, like by the time it came out there was discourse whether what was going to happen in the future, and then I heard that
Yeah,
Henry
well,
Cavill came back,
because
right?
yeah, I
And
think
then
because the discourse surrounding Henry Cavill's letting go, because
mhm,
I don't think by that point we knew that there was an official DCU reset.
yeah.
Because like they had teased, because I mean, The Rock is a marketing machine, and he was like doing like the power scale is going to shift in the DCEU and
Yeah,
everything,
which was
right?
such
And
bullshit. It was so obvious
and
now
then we
that
get
wasn't going
that
to happen.
we get that Superman tease at the end. And then I think all the news broke after the fact
Yeah,
of
yeah, you're right.
DCEU getting a reset. So, um, yeah, I watched that for the first time within the last few days. Again, Dwayne Johnson just is a very safe filmmaker. He can't lose.
Yeah.
Um, and ironically, he does lose at the box office and at the like the critical reception level. Um,
Yeah.
so there wasn't a ton to love about this movie. Like there is some really frustrating. This is a minor gripe I didn't bring up for Batman v Superman, where Clark mentions, I think, to Lois of like, I have to go like talk down Bruce and try and convince him to help me defeat Lex or whatever. And he goes there and Batman raises the like sonar machines or whatever and like puts him off his feet for a couple seconds. Uh like right as he's being like, Bruce, stop, we can't do this. We have to go like fight the bigger enemy. He
Yeah.
gets like put down by the sonar machines, then he just starts throwing fists. And it's like, you didn't
What?
even try to
Yeah.
convince him at all. And the
No.
same thing happens in Black Adam, where like the Justice Society is sent to go like they learn that Black Adam has like reawakened after 5,000 years or whatever, and Waller goes and sends them to like put like cuffs on him basically,
Yeah.
and they're like, we need to figure out a plan so that we can enact like peaceful negotiations. And fucking Hawkman shows up and Dr. Fate. Like, it's not just one of the characters, but they're like, you need to surrender. Like, you are too dangerous. And Dr. Fate literally says like something along the lines of like, you have two options, kneel or die. And it's like, what are we doing here?
What?
Like, you're not even trying to like peacefully. There's a way to write that type of stuff where you can have this high tension conversation of like
Yeah.
someone's on edge and like ready to throw fists, and you have to be like trying to talk them down, trying to like convince them to come with you, and still have that go awry. But like when your characters are just like, yeah, before we get there, we should try and talk him down so he can like, we can put him in cuffs and everything and subdue him. And then they
And then
get
they
there, it's
don't.
like, if you don't do this, we're gonna kill you. And it's like, that's not how you convince somebody to do something. It's like, it's just so
Yeah.
frustrating, dude. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, the character moments like Black Adam, there is a cool kind of theme they bring up of like this city, this fictional city, Kondak, being like trying to be liberated from oppressors, and finally having their own hero in Black Adam to kind of liberate them and be their own protector. But it just kind of gets lost in the weeds of everything with the Justice Society, and like the freaking MacGuffin crown thing that unlocks demons, and like a really poorly paced like third act that comes way too late. It's just, the action is also like, again, a like big like offender for like gaudy slow-mo CGI fights. They feel so weird. Needle drops in this movie feel almost as bad as the first Suicide Squad film.
Yeah.
um it's just not good, man.
Yeah, I
uh
was like, there was not a single part of me that wanted to watch this movie. Like, again, like I said earlier, Dwayne Johnson, like, not a draw for me. Like, I knew he would be a terrible superhero because he'd have to win every fight. Like, he'd never
yeah.
lose. And then he's Black Adam. I'm like, sure, I guess. But I mean, at this point, I didn't care anyways. The only thing I cared
Hmm.
about was like seeing Henry Cavill back. So I watched that, and that's all I've seen of this movie. And from what I've heard from you, there's a zero
Yeah.
chance I'll ever watch this movie. Like, no
No,
chance.
there's like, I think the most I could say for in terms of recommendations is like maybe check out some of the like Doctor Fate fight sequences, because like he's like the DC Doctor Strange basically.
Yeah.
So he's got some really cool sequences as well, very evocative of some of the Doctor Strange fights we've seen in the MCU.
Yeah.
So watch a YouTube compilation of some of the fights for
And
Doctor
that's
Fate
it.
specifically, not even Black Adam. Um, but it's really really bad. Definitely on the lower tier. It's sitting comfortably above the 26, what is it, 2017, 2016 Suicide Squad and the Justice League. So
Yep.
that's all I really need to say anymore about that.
Pretty much. Yep.
um Now we're kind of in the back half of the universe, and this is like the bad streak for me. um Shazam Fury of the Gods, the second one, it's it gets the most like negative reaction from me. A lot of the time it's like middle of the road, like forgettable. It was like, it's fine, or like it's not great, so I probably won't rewatch it. But like
Yeah.
Shazam 2 is the most disappointing movie of the whole universe for me, because of how great the first one was, because of the promise it set up, because of the potential with a sequel. I was really looking forward to seeing more Shazam, but
Yeah.
they just fumble it so hard in the second one. You haven't seen this one as well, right? We're kind of in
No.
the territory where you haven't seen anything, right?
Yeah, by this point, I mean, it had already been announced, I think, right? Now we're in the territory where
Yes.
it was like, okay, so yeah,
Yes.
all these movies I immediately wrote off. I'm like,
Going,
I
yeah,
haven't
going
liked
into
any of them.
2023. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, all of this is going to be reset. I'm not wasting my time. Like,
Yeah.
Shazam, I might watch just because if I watch the first one, I like it. But again, you saying it's such a disappointment, it's like, why would I waste my time?
the first one is still really good, but I think going into this year, we were like, okay, all of these movies don't really matter
Yeah,
anymore.
really.
But I still went and watched them anyway. So, what does that say? I guess.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, man, Shazam: Fear of the Gods is just like such wasted potential. It's so all over the place. It just feels like such a nothing movie. Like there's so many just like boring action sequences with like questionable character decisions. There's retcons, there's lazy exposition. um it's just so much why in this movie is what I came away from the rewatch with.
Yeah.
Is just like, why does this movie exist? Because like it doesn't do anything interesting with its characters. It just doesn't. It feels so surface level, um, and it's so afraid to commit to anything because like the final act, they literally do a Deus Ex Machina where they bring in Wonder Woman and they basically undo all of the consequences that just were carried out in the third act. So it's like, cool, nothing actually matters anyway, which is just so evocative of the tone of this year with the
Yeah.
DC films. It's like, great, none of this
Mhm.
matters, so I
Pretty
guess I
much, yeah.
wasted my time. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, man, they're like, and again, Zachary Levi wasn't as good this time around. I don't know if he was just like hamming it up more, or if they're just, I mean, evidently in the script there really isn't much to do from a character standpoint. There's like
Yeah.
glimmers. It's just concepts. Like again, I said it's surface level. There's concepts here that it's like, okay, Billy Batson finally has a family unit that he wants to hold on to and doesn't want to let go, and doesn't like is has a fear of losing again. So that's a very interesting character like dilemma, but it just doesn't go anywhere, man. um it's just so bad, so disappointing, so much promise, um and it was wasted.
Yep.
So yeah, moving on, we're going into the Flash now. And this was the biggest surprise for me, the one you haven't seen, Cole, just because, especially considering like bringing Michael Keaton back, um, and
See, but I have no connection to Michael Keaton. Like, he's not my Batman either. Like, I honestly, Batman
okay,
89, I don't love. Like, it's fine, but I never go back and rewatch and be like, this is so good.
okay.
Actually, I prefer Batman Returns, if we're being honest. Um, but even then, like,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I,
Okay.
so like that wasn't a draw for me. But like a lot of people were like, I'm going to see it because of him. But I'm just like, cool. Like Christian
Yeah,
Bale is my guy. Like the Dark Knight, if it was him,
sure.
maybe. But even then, I don't think I
Hmm.
would have, because I'm just like, I don't know, nothing about this
It would
movie.
also, yeah, it just like thinking about Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne and Batman. You want to talk about tonal dissonance and like tonal shifts, like he would feel like a fish out of water in
Yeah,
all of
like it
these
wouldn't
movies,
work.
man.
Yeah,
No,
no,
it's way
not
too
even Man of
grounded and
Steel, which was
serious.
kind of like in they were imagining in this grounded universe. Like he doesn't fit there either.
Yeah,
So I'm actually really glad they didn't bring him back in this
yeah,
abomination of bringing everybody back for sequences. Like
yeah.
I've seen some of this movie, and I'm just
Oh
and the
God, yeah.
Ezra Miller
God,
stuff,
dude.
like that kind of turned me off too. I'm just like, this guy is such a
Yep.
fucking weirdo. Like I don't know if I can
Hmm.
really watch him on the screen anymore. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen the CGI from some of that, and I've seen George Clooney and all this. I'm just like,
It's so
you
bad.
just want to. Again, we
It's
talk
so
about
bad.
DC throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. It's like, how can you not learn your lesson this far along? Like, what are we doing?
the the history surrounding this film too, it's just mind-boggling we even got it in theaters in the first place,
Yeah.
especially coming after the fact, because this was also in contention for the news cycle talking about Warner Brothers scrapping DC films,
Mm,
right?
yep.
Like with Batgirl getting canned and everything
Yeah.
too, right? um it's just so surprising. Like it's such an example of sunk cost fallacy at this point. I think it's like
Yeah.
10 years this film has been in production hell trying to get
Hmm.
made and released. I was surprised we even got it in the first place. and really don't understand why it got released at all. There, like, it's at best, it's like an okay solo film, but like there's just so many contrivances. Like the third act again is like a big problem, like kind of how Shazam and Black Adam were, of like just kind of the main character not learning anything from the lessons he just experienced this entire
Yeah.
movie. So it's like all for the sake of like a fun comedic gag at the end and a
Hmm.
cameo. So it's like, okay, well then what was the point of this whole thing? And like the CGI speaks for
Bad.
itself. Like I
Yeah.
don't care if the freaking creator was like it's supposed to look like that. It's like that doesn't mean it's
Okay.
looking good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Everything
uh
about this movie just looked like a train wreck. Like I agree. I don't
yeah.
know why they decided to release this movie. Like I think James Gunn even tweeted like it's one of his favorite superhero movies or something. It's just like,
Yeah, there
what?
was a lot of buzz surrounding
Right?
the like
Yeah.
pre-release of this film, like a lot of early reviews being like this is like a great film. This is one of the best superhero films I've seen. It's like, what? There has
Yeah.
to be something in James Gunn's contract to
Yeah.
like promote DC projects
Well, yeah, he
because
wasn't
I
gonna
don't
shit
believe
on
that
it
for
because he
one
had already
second.
been hired, right? Like, so he was kind of in a lose
Exactly.
lose. He can't say the movie sucks if he thinks it sucks. So he kind of has to say it's
Yeah,
awesome. And then if it sucks, then he's kind of shot himself in the foot again. So it's like
yeah,
lose lose
for sure.
situation. But yeah, this like I again I had zero interest in seeing this movie. Another one I'm not gonna watch. I don't care anymore about this iteration of the DCU. Like,
No.
yeah, not great.
No, it's absolutely skippable. It goes in the skippable category. It's just so weird. We get another also random Wonder Woman cameo, where she comes in and saves the day. Basically, nowhere near to the offensiveness of Shazam 2, but yeah, it's just such throwaway cameo stuff. All of the like the multiverse stuff with Nicolas Cage Superman and what's his name, Christopher Reeves Superman,
Yeah.
and like the live action like 60s Batman show with Adam
Hmm.
West.
So
Just
bad. Like,
so
who thought
why,
that was a good
man?
idea? Like,
Yeah, they're trying to do like multiverse stuff with cameos, but it's just such a shoehorn in that
yeah.
it's not earned in the slightest. Like
Yeah.
even barely the Michael Keaton stuff, and especially the George Clooney scene at the end. Um, just they don't feel like they earn their place in the story really at all.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's really not good. It's not like the biggest disappointment. Like the first time I went and saw it in theaters, I had a fun time,
Hmm.
and like I think some of the dynamic between like the berries like worked for me here and there. There were flashes of like comedic moments that worked, but yeah, I don't know. I felt pretty stone faced the
Hmm.
second time around. It really doesn't hold up at all, and yeah, it's not worth the time for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the note we're ending on with this
Uh,
whole franchise in review. What a strange
very.
cinematic universe, man! It's
Yeah.
so all over the place.
Yeah, it's
Um,
very middle of the pack, and then you have, Suicide Squad, which is great, and then you have just the absolute bottom of the barrel superhero movies,
yeah,
like very similar to like early Marvel, like Fantastic Four, that kind of era, where it's like they're trying
yeah,
stuff and it's just not working.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, a reset was definitely needed. I'm glad they found two
Hmm.
guys that they think they can do it. Um, yeah, they have a
Yeah,
lot of work to do though. Like we're gonna have two Batmans again. We're gonna have
yep.
Superman, a new Superman, and then we don't
Hmm.
know pretty much anybody else. Like who's coming back, who's
Yeah.
not. Like
Well,
there's so much
and
world
it's
building they
also
have
a
to do.
pretty it's a pretty like big undertaking also with the way they're doing things of like wanting to cast people, and the people they cast are going to be in games, in animated shows,
Oh,
in
I
feature
forgot about that.
films, live action feature films. Like that is a big, I don't know if that's like going to be something they stick to for the
I
long
hope
run
not.
because that's like very like big thing, but we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll see.
Jeez. Yeah, I forgot they were doing that. What a bad idea. Oh man. I think they'll change that. I hope so.
They have
I don't need to watch
That's too
games
big.
and TV shows and all this. Like, you can have multiple you already have 2 Batman. Like, I
Yeah,
don't want to see
exactly.
Robert Pattinson go away. Like, I want to see that story continue. Like, you can have
Yeah,
multi versions.
me
Like, we
too.
know that already. So just
Yeah,
do that.
yeah, for sure. I appreciate the wanting to commit to like this is the voice of Superman type of thing, right?
Hmm.
But like, and I don't necessarily get the idea that they're like you're gonna have to play this video game and
Hmm.
watch this animated series to understand this live action film. I don't think that's the route they'll take. I think it's just a more consistent casting lineup going
Yeah.
forward. But even that is still such a big like
Yeah.
logistical nightmare, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Just make a
so,
good
but
game
again,
first. Don't worry about having it to be
yeah,
centered around Superman, right? Like, you've already
yeah.
got this new Suicide Squad, which is,
Like if you have a
oh my god.
nice like or a game written and like which has like great like gameplay and everything, if your Green Lantern can't make it because of scheduling conflicts, it's
Yeah.
like well, and also what actor is really going to want to sign a contract deal like
Yeah.
that where they're locked in for like 10 years of making
Yeah.
whatever the studio wants, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Who would want to do that? Like, that's a lot of time in the booth. Like, and then if you're doing
Yeah,
mocap for games too, like, you're just Superman for 10 years. That's it. That's all the time you
exactly.
have for. Like, good
Yeah.
luck.
So, yeah, I don't know how that's going to work out, but again, we shall see. I do like, again, there was a moment throughout this universe's run that I think, like, just from like a film collector standpoint and like a piece of film history, I think I do kind of want to own a chunk of this universe
Hmm.
as kind of like a selective timeline of case study to look at of like, oh yeah, this sequence of films from way back when, right? Um,
Yeah.
but it's again very selective. I definitely don't
Yeah.
want to own all of these films.
Yeah. Don't need
Um,
no box set of this bullshit. That's for sure. Just
yeah,
give me a few.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think that is where we will leave this franchise in review. Cole, thank you so much for joining me and letting me talk your ear off about all things DC.
Anytime.
Uh, and yeah, again, very excited to see where they go with the DCU going forward. If nothing else, we will get the Batman 2 and Joker Folie à Deux or whatever it is with
Yep.
Lady Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix. So we'll
That's
see. I'm
deserved
sure we'll
its own
still get
podcast. What the fuck is that movie?
right. That's honestly, it's kind of my one of my most anticipated films, just
Me
from
too,
sheer
because I'm just like,
curiosity.
that sounds kind of awesome. Also sounds like
It
the
does.
worst idea of all time. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll save that for later down the line next year. Um, Thanks again for joining me. Where can the people find you?
Instagram, Cole Parkinson 4. See pictures of my
Perfect.
cat. She didn't walk through this time, so oh, there she
Yeah, we
is.
got all the cameos out of the way. There's
There.
Elena.
Quick Luna cameo for all the people out there.
All right. Yeah, let's wrap this up. You can find me wherever you're listening to or watching the No Score Review Show. These franchise and reviews are exclusive to the YouTube channel. So be sure to go check out the podcast services as well for regular episodes of the No Score Review Show and the re-review show. I've still only released one episode of that like kind of subsection of the show. So hopefully more episodes of that will come in due time. But yeah, you can go check out the franchise and review playlist. Cole has been previously featured on there as well, where we talked about the Indiana Jones films. Um, and I know we avoided a Blue Beetle for this, but I do have a solo review of that on the channel for you to go check out if you really want to know my thoughts on that film. It's definitely like barring Aquaman 2's release, it's the best DC live action film I've seen this year. Not that that's saying much, but yeah, you can just go check out all of the other videos I have released and stay tuned because there will be a episode of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom review. I'm going to try. It'll likely just be a solo review, just because it's so close to the holidays. But I will be sure to release my thoughts on that. You can also go check out all of my written reviews on my Letterboxd of my DCEU rewatch if you want to go and check out those. And I'm also doing a year in review where Cole will also be featured, as well as many of my other guests that I've had on this year. So stay tuned for that. That'll be released closer to the end of the year, where we talk about all of our favorite films, TV shows, video games that have come out. And otherwise you can stay tuned to all the socials at No Score or at No Score Reviews. And until next time, we'll see you in the next review. Bye-bye.